right, everybody, thanks for joining me. There's just a few of you, but I think we are going to plan to post this a little bit later for anybody who can't join us tonight. We've got a lot going on tonight. We've got Jason Reynolds speaking at the Glenbard Parent Series at 7, and if you don't already have information about that, you can find it on our social media pages. It's a free lecture, and you don't have to be affiliated with the Glenbard schools to join that. We also have a presidential debate tonight. So we do this presentation because it's very, very political. And I just want to warn everybody that when you are talking about fake news, it's really easy to get into politics. And so I'm going to ask you to leave your politics out of the chat. I'm going to try to do the same here. But it doesn't mean that you're not going to see something that could potentially offend you. We are going to be looking at examples from all areas of the political arena. And there's likely to be something in here that rubs you a little bit the wrong way. But I'd like you to think about that, and we can talk about it at the end. As I mentioned, if you do have questions or comments, just drop them in the chat, and I will try to address them either as we go or at the end. And Ginny, yes, this presentation will be recorded. I think we will plan to either share it on our social media, or you can send me an email and I'll let you know where it's going to be. So first things first, let me just introduce myself. I'm Amy Franco. I work here at the Glen Ellyn Public Library. Welcome to the library. I hope you're library users, and if not, I hope you come and see us sometime soon. I am the assistant director of the adult department here at the library, and also a programming librarian. And what that means is I designed this class with a colleague about 2 years ago. Actually, it's been about 4 years now, right around, the inauguration of our current president. And we both had a really strong interest in the topic. We started to really pay attention to the impact that fake news was having on our election cycle. And then we found out after the fact that it actually had a huge impact. And it's kind of evolved since then. So my colleagues and I now, a lot of times when we disagree with each other, we will accuse each other of offering up fake news, kind of in jest. And that's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about fake news in the information source. And what you may not know is that librarians undergo extensive training to recognize when information is needed. And we have the specific ability to locate, evaluate, and use that information effectively, which are skills that we refer to in the library profession as information literacy. So we love to take questions like this. We're not afraid of them. And if you haven't already contacted us with a question about information, or, evaluating your sources, or asking whether something is fake news, please contact us. Anybody who works at our second floor information desk is qualified to answer your questions. We love getting these questions. They're rarely asked of us, and these are the ones that we tend to fight over when we do receive them. So as I mentioned, this program is intended to be an unbiased information session so that you can learn more about the topic and walk away equipped with information you'll need to analyze your news sources. I mentioned also that it's a highly politically charged topic and can be controversial, but we are not intending to have a debate here. I'm going to show you information from both sides of a political argument, and during the Q&A, I'm going to skip over any questions that are highly politically motivated. I hope you learn a lot, and as always, we are happy here at the Glen Ellyn Public Library to point you in the direction of more information about fake news. And if you're joining us from another library, your library is also qualified to answer these questions. So I encourage you to contact your library, ask your questions, talk to your librarians. That's what we're here for. So let's get started. And Rachel is joining me. She's one of my colleagues, and she says she will be sharing this on social media for those who are wondering. So this presentation tends to take about 3 major sections of fake news. So we're going to talk a lot about terminology so that we can make sure that we are all on the same page about all of this information. I'm going to show you some tools that can help you identify sources, do some fact checking, things like that, which I hope you'll use later tonight when you watch the debate. And then we're going to talk about what a good source might look like. So first things first, let's talk about fake news. So fake news is news stories that are heavily biased or outright fabricated. And the important point here that I want to mention is that there is an intention to deceive. Now, we know that news changes quickly, especially breaking news, And sometimes things become out of date, or they could be, you know, biased in a particular way. But if those things are updated, you know, we in the profession, in the information profession, we're okay with that. The key here is that there is an intention to deceive. And so here are a couple of examples. So this one, InfoWars and Alex Jones. Alex Jones is an internet personality. He recently went through a really high-profile divorce. He may still be in the midst of it. I'm not really sure. And even though he has White House press credentials, or did at the time, he identified him in his divorce documents as a performance artist. So he's here to kind of stir the pot. He represents kind of the right wing of what we know about fake news, and generally things that he is saying, they have very little basis in fact, unfortunately, but he has a huge audience and people really tend to listen to him because he's very sensational and he's very charismatic. On the other side of the aisle, we have Occupy Democrats, and my colleagues and I have a joke about Occupy Democrats, and it's this: try to find a headline on their website that doesn't have the word just in it. Everything is just happening. This information was just released. And so they're really trying to sell you on sensational news that a lot of times is taken out of context. It may be out of date. There may be some other, you know, information that puts that story into context, but they present everything as if it's breaking news, which we don't like. And third, social media stories. So we're hearing right now a lot about Facebook and Twitter and their fact-checking archive, you know, processes and archives and things like that. A few years ago, we were talking about Cambridge Analytica, and unfortunately, it seems to have gotten worse since then. These social media platforms are now employing fact checkers, but a lot of times they don't catch things in time before things go viral. And we're going to talk about that in just a little bit. So next up, let's talk about the Fourth Estate. So the Fourth Estate is a societal political force whose institution whose influence is not consistently or officially recognized. And in the United States, this refers to print journalism or the press. So if you go back to high school civics, you can remember that we have these three branches of government, pretty straightforward. And then we have our First Amendment rights. And so these three branches of government have checks and balances over each other. And the press is supposed to be the external check and balance on these three branches of power. Let's talk about satire and comedy. So satire is comedy pieces intended to look like news, which are usually intended to criticize, ridicule, or scorn. So everybody falls for The Onion. It's a great news source for, you know, kind of sensationalism. You don't want to take it literally, but it does provide some commentary on what's happening. I see it's happening less now because I think people are more aware of The Onion, but people fall for it all the time. They share it on social media. They take it as fact. It's very sensational. It's kind of like gotcha journalism, if you can call it that, and people fall for it. We also have Saturday Night Live. So anytime we have political turmoil in this country, Saturday Night Live sees a ratings boost. So I think this week or possibly next week, they are going to be airing again. We're a couple weeks before an election. Everybody's going to be watching. People are going to be talking about it. And they are presenting these things that happen in everyday life with an intention to ridicule or scorn them. And the one that people really do tend to fall for, and I see this quite a bit on social media, is the Borowitz report. So the New Yorker is a great source for information. It's highly analytical, maybe not the best place to get your breaking news, but it does have columnists. And Andy Borowitz is one of them, and he writes a satire column. And sometimes the things that he writes are things that could absolutely happen. And we live in a world where nothing is really shocking anymore. And so he writes these shocking headlines, people pick them up, they take them as fact, and they share them on social media. So the thing to remember here is that when we're talking about satire, it comes with the caveat that satire is under no obligation to provide a disclaimer to you. There's not going to be a red banner at the top of the web page that says, hey, be careful, this is satire, this isn't real. they're kind of in the business of trying to trick you, trying to get you to fall for it. And they love it when that happens because it's really funny. So take it for granted when you're not sure. We're going to talk about this later, but when you're not sure about whether something is satire, I'm going to show you about how you can check up on that. Okay, so let's talk about going viral. You've heard of this term before. And what it means is when something goes viral on social media, it reaches more users based on the number of likes, retweets, shares, and other interactions. So every time you interact with something on the internet, you click on it on social media, you might like it, you might comment, you might share, something like that. Each time you interact with that post or web page or whatever it is, you are telling the algorithm, which is kind of a fancy word for the computer language that is going on behind the scenes, that is an important piece of information. And so the algorithm tallies up all these likes, comments, retweets, shares, everything, and it assigns a priority to which ones people are really interacting with and engaging with, and it pushes them out. So if you like something, Facebook knows, oh, I might want to push that out to more people who I think might like this. And it's completely done by computers. Humans have very little interaction with it, but that's how things go viral. So a couple of things that have gone viral. This happened 4 years ago. Pope Francis shocks the world, endorses Donald Trump for president, releases statement. Totally fake news. But 1 million people shared it on Facebook. And if you're religious, if you're Catholic, the Pope is, somebody that is important in your life, that might mean something to you. And if you don't have the fact-checking kind of skepticism in the back of your mind, you might fall for something like this and it could influence your opinion. Now this one, Balloon Boy, you may remember this. This happened several years ago, and this was kind of going viral before social media was really a thing. So this young boy, his family sent him up in this balloon, and the story was that it was lost. And so they sent out an FBI task force. They broke into your daytime programming. This was the deal, and it turned out that it was a complete hoax. It was untrue. The boy was like hiding in the barn or something like that. But people really cared about it, and so all of these, kind of TV news was pushing it out to people because they knew that people cared about it and they wanted the boy to come home safe. He was already home safe. So that feeds right into hoax, which is a blatantly false or misleading story or news, such as untrue celebrity deaths or outrageous events that did not happen. So this happens all the time. If you are a Tom Hanks fan, there is a hoax that resurfaces every few years that he fell off a cliff in Australia and he died. Terrible, completely untrue. A couple of examples of this. So in the early days of cell phones and the internet, there was this thing that went viral, and it came in by email. So it was an email that was kind of formulated to look like it might have come from Apple. It had a picture of an iPhone, and it was advertising that if you put your phone in the microwave and you microwaved it for 30 seconds, it would charge the whole phone in 30 seconds. Now, what happens when you microwave your phone? It's probably going to explode. It's going to end in disaster one way or another. But a lot of people did this, and they destroyed their phones, they destroyed their microwaves, and they destroyed their kitchens and maybe their sanity. So we have to be skeptical when we're looking at things on the internet. Just because it's on the internet doesn't mean it's true. Another one that happened, this was maybe about 10 years ago. Somebody started up a Twitter account that had the Shell logo, Shell gas, Shell oil, and started tweeting things like this little Arctic fox that says, "You can't run your SUV on cute, let's go." And it turned out that it was started by Greenpeace in an effort to, get people to question where their gas was coming from, to make it was kind of a PR stunt. But people really fell for it, and they were outraged that Shell was tweeting these things that were really kind of horrible. Totally fake. There was an intention to deceive. Greenpeace got what they wanted. Shell did not. But you have to be really careful. Just because it's on the internet doesn't mean it's true. So trolling is disregarding internet etiquette in an attempt to elicit a highly emotional response, which is sometimes funny and sometimes serious. It can lead to doxing, which I'll mention in a minute, and it's closely related to cyberbullying. So this is a little image of a troll. Basically, a troll is just there to stir the pot, to make people angry. If you are reading the comments on an article, which you know you should never do, but sometimes you just want to, you'll see a lot of trolls in the comments saying really horrible things because they're hiding behind the anonymity of the internet. But this happened in real life. So Leslie Jones is a comedian. She was in a movie called Ghostbusters. It got kind of mixed reviews. Some people liked it, some people didn't. But she responded to her critics on Twitter, and she was defending the movie. She was trying to discredit the reviewers who said that it was bad, and that kind of thing is like blood in the water for trolls. So all these people came out of the woodwork. They were saying really horrible things about her. They were saying such horrible things about her that I can't show you what they said. It was awful. She left Twitter for a long time. She eventually came back. It really affected her mental health. People were making threats. The other thing that happened in this situation was people released her personal information online. So somebody found her home address and her cell phone, and they put it out on social media. So she was subject to all kinds of harassment. And that's what doxing is. It's releasing someone's personal information, especially contact information, home address, something like that on the internet. A little more lighthearted example. You remember several years ago when there was some criticism that not all of our legislators were taking town halls. And so somebody went to Florida, or maybe they were already in Florida, and they hung up these missing posters. And it's a little hard to see in this picture, but it looks like a missing dog photo. And it's got those little pull tabs at the bottom, like, oh, if you've seen this dog, pull this tab, call this number. And it was the number to his office in Florida. So it was kind of trolling him in a lighthearted way to say, you know, let's hear from Marco in his home state of Florida. So PostTruth was the word of the year for the Oxford Dictionary Online in 2016. And what it means is that objective facts are less influential in shaping public opinion than appeals to emotion and personal belief. So you can see the frequency of this word. We don't have any newer statistics for this. We probably do, but I didn't find a pretty graph like this. But you can see that it really exploded right before the previous election, general election, that is. So what this means is that if you attend let's say a political rally, for example, and someone's giving a stump speech and they're talking about violence is increasing and we have to do something about it. Well, the facts are that violence is decreasing. You know, not right now, but at the time, that was the case. And in certain areas, hotspots, you know, big cities, Chicago saw a lot of violence around the election 4 years ago. In certain hotspots, violence was increasing, but there's an overall trend that violence is decreasing. But if you are someone who believes that, you know, in gun control or policing or, you know, other methods of quelling the violence, this is really going to speak to you and it's going to get you riled up. But the facts don't support it. You want to be really careful when your legislators or when other people's legislators go on cable news, because they're being invited as pundits and as commentators. They're not necessarily talking about objective facts. They might be saying things like, you know, we need to do something about this issue. And what they're trying to do is get you on their side. They're not trying to present the facts to you. They're trying to buy your interest and hold your interest so that you will eventually vote for them. And a lot of times when we see that on cable news, they're not even our own legislators. Here in Illinois, we don't hear from a lot of legislators. There's a lot of homogeneity, especially in our area. But we tend to see legislators from swing states. We tend to see legislators from blue states go on, you know, blue networks, and red states go on red networks, because they're trying to appeal to their base. So an echo chamber is a room with sound reflecting walls used for hollow or echoing sound effects. And what this means is that on the internet, it's surrounding yourself with like-minded people and rejecting differing opinions. So this is a very simple graphic to illustrate this point, but basically what it means is when you have somebody who disagrees with you, especially politically, you may defriend them or unfollow them or stop interacting with them in some way. And so you're narrowing your echo chamber because you're surrounding yourself with people who are like you. And that can be a little bit dangerous because people who are like you, who are very politically involved, may or may not be getting their facts from reliable sources. And if they aren't, or they get it wrong one time, that can really have a big impact on your own political opinion. So it's always a good idea to talk to people that you disagree with, read news sources that you disagree with, and see what the other side is saying and try to engage them in a friendly dialogue. It's really hard right now, I know that, and we're talking in ideals, but you know, if you can find a way to have a civil conversation with somebody who doesn't see your side of the story, you might both learn something from it. Clickbait on the internet refers to content whose main purpose is to attract attention and encourage visitors to click on a link to a particular web page. So remember, we talked about going viral. So the other element of that is that websites that are paying for people to advertise on them, they, a lot of times their ad revenue comes from the number of clicks. And so if it's like, here's my example, you'll never believe it. The one that I really like to see is like 17 reasons your cat is trying to kill you. Number 4 will shock you. It uses these kind of unbelievable, sensational words to try to get you to click on it. It's usually harmless, but you just want to be careful that anytime you click on something, you're telling the algorithm that this is important and other people may find it important as well. So if it's reasons that your cat is trying to kill you, probably not going to hurt anybody, but at least you want to be aware of it. So these are some stories that I pulled from Facebook. This was a while ago. I know Facebook looks a little bit different now, but these are all completely fake. But if you are really, really involved, if you're political, these might really speak to you. So this one in particular, this is sponsored, which means this organization, which is not affiliated with any formal organization, it's just a group of apparently 137,000 people on the internet. Somebody paid to push this out to kind of enhance the algorithm so that it goes to more people. But these are all, now this one's really interesting. This was several years ago. So this is BM, which kind of sounds like it might be BLM, might be Black Lives Matter. We don't know. We don't know who this group is affiliated with. Somebody paid to post it to social media, and it was a rally. 33,000 people went to, or were interested in this rally, and about 17,000 people said that they were going to go to it. It was in Union Square in New York. So 17,000 people show up to this rally. The police don't know about it. There's no permit. There's no crowd control. There's nobody there to make sure that it's safe. And you can see that this is really, you know, it gets you riled up, but then it's not real. It's just somebody, you know, maybe in the basement or something of their mom's house, trying to get people to rally behind an organization that may or may not be real. So Facebook, since we took screenshots of this, they have added a little blue check. So that's for verified. That's one way that you can tell that the source that you're interacting with on social media is the real deal. Now this one's not. It doesn't have a blue check. It wouldn't have a blue check now, but Black Lives Matter would, because they would try to get that verified. A few more of these. And then we get to these really, really charged words. So alt-right, social justice warrior, fascism. Not going to go into these. I just present them to you because they mean very different things to different people. And you want to be really careful about who you're talking to and how you're referring to them. So collectively, these are kind of pejorative words. They're not, sometimes they're affiliated with fringe ideologies. You want to be really, really careful when you use words like this. So let's talk about some tools. Now, I have a really great handout. I'm happy to send it to you if you would like to have it. It's got all of these handouts, all of these terms and everything, so you don't have to take notes. I should have said that at the beginning. If you'd like to receive it, just drop your email in the chat. I'm the only one who sees that, and I'll make sure that you receive the handout by the end of the day today. So the first one that we're going to look at is this how to spot fake news. This is a handout that was put together by the International Federation of Library Associations and Institutions. It says it right down here. We know that librarians are a good source of information. They tend to be unbiased. They really care about evaluating sources. So we know that this is a good source. It also says in really teeny tiny print down here, with help from factcheck.org, which is one of our favorite fact-checking websites. And I really like this one because it takes 8 really basic what's the word? I can't think of it. 8 really concepts and kind of waters them down into a way, to present this information that's kind of pretty. So let's look at the first 4. So number 1, and we're talking about online news right now. You can do this with your print news too. It's really difficult to fake print news, but it does happen. When we do talk about fake news, it's usually in the context of the internet. So first things first, you want to consider the source. So you want to click away from the site, investigate its mission, its contact information. You should be able to find out who's on the board of directors, whether those people have any political interests or financial interests, who's paying to keep the lights on, where does their ad revenue come from. This should be really easy to find. Usually on a political or on a news website, it's going to be right in the header under about or, editorial board or something like that. Really easy to find. On a less, they're not very good website, they'll bury it or you won't be able to find it at all. So read beyond the headline. Headlines can be outrageous in an effort to get clicks. What's the whole story? So we have a big problem with internet news in this country in that we don't read to the end of the article. And a lot of times, whatever is in the first paragraph of the article does not have the full context of what's being reported. So you want to make sure that you read the whole article. You can go to other websites, read the same piece of information, read their version of what happened to try to get a really good picture. You can check the author. So in journalism, in reporting, reputation is everything. So you can find very easily their credentials, where they went to school, whether their credentials have ever been called into question, and if they're even a real person. A lot of people who are publishing fake news on the internet, they're pushing out these, social media stories. They're not real people, or they're hiding behind an alias. They're hiding behind the anonymity of the internet. Number 4, supporting sources. So click the links. If you are reading especially an investigative report, it'll have supporting sources, primary sources, secondary sources, anything that the author of that article used to inform whatever they're reporting on. Check the date. This is one that happens all the time. Reposting old news stories don't mean that they're relevant to current events. So I'll give you an example of this. I was in a store at the mall when I heard about the Boston bombing. So a horrible thing happened several years ago. And the way that I found out about it was Twitter. All of a sudden, people were tweeting about it. Things were kind of going viral on Twitter. There was a lot of information. And if you recall, several years ago when that was happening, there was not a lot of information. We knew that there was this bombing. We didn't know who did it. We didn't know if they were affiliated with some terrorist organization, if they were kind of a lone wolf. There were several days when we really didn't know who this person was, and it turned out it was 2 young men. But that information changed really, really rapidly. So something that was posted, early in the day, early after that event, is not going to hold water later in the day. So you really want to make sure that whatever source you're checking is updating regularly. If they do get it wrong, that they correct it, and reputable news sources will post corrections, alterations, updates, the date and time of the update, things like that, usually right at the top or right at the end of the article. Is it a joke? If it's too outlandish, it might be satire. Research the site and author to be sure. Usually you can just Google it, The Onion, and Wikipedia or a number of other sources will tell you that it's satire. Check your biases. Consider if your own beliefs could affect your judgment. So if you're reading something, if you only get your news from one information source and you're reading something that really gets you riled up, it's feeding into your bias. And what you can do to counteract this is read across the aisle. So I have this app on my phone. I'm a huge news nerd. I'm a data nerd. And I have an app called Reading Across the Aisle. And so it tells me when I'm reading the news, how many of those sources are left-leaning, how many are right-leaning, and if I'm reading too much from one side, I can read across the aisle. I can read what the other side is saying. And of course, you can ask the experts. So ask a librarian or consult a fact-checking site. So this is a news quality chart. This came from, I found it on Twitter. It's a little outdated. She's updated it. I like the first version of this, which is why I'm not showing you the update. But she's a patent lawyer in Colorado, so maybe not the best source. So we're going to take it for a grain of salt, but I do think that it lays out news sources in a way that is really easy to understand. So on the x-axis, which is left to right, we have partisan bias. That should be very clear to you. And on the y-axis, up and down, we have journalistic quality, ranging all the way from complex and analytical up here, all the way down to sensational or clickbait. So when we start in the middle, this kind of brownish gray dot, we have a number of news sources. So these are primarily your daily newspapers, your local news channels. I would add your, the Glen Ellen News, the Daily Herald, things like that. These are going to be the best sources for breaking news because they're going to report the news as it happens. Now, it's true that we have left-leaning and right-leaning newspapers. That comes from editorial boards. We're not talking about opinions and editorials. We're talking about how they present the news. In the top bubble here, this kind of greenish yellow one, these tend to have minimum partisan bias. Journalistic quality is very high. Maybe not the best place to get your daily news. These are more investigative sources. These might take the day-to-day news and tell us what the context is, what this means, if there's any political or historical information that may add to the story, things like that. This blue dot at the bottom, USA Today and CNN are in this one. Minimal partisan bias, not super renowned for their journalistic quality, but if these are your only sources, it's better than reading no news at all. So you'll notice that the farther we move away from the center, the lower we tend to get on the quality scale. So on the left and right, we have on the left this kind of large blue oval. We have them on both sides. And in this one, we've got MSNBC and the Huffington Post. And on the right, we have Fox News and others. So the thing about this is when we're talking about just the news, that tends to be very good. But these sources tend to offer up a lot of punditry. Pundits are experts that are trying to feed into your echo chamber. They're offering a lot of opinion. It's not necessarily the news. And so you want to be really careful about how much time you spend in these two blue bubbles. And then all the way at the end, we have these red dots. On the left, we have, ironically enough, Bipartisan Report, Occupy Democrats, many others. On the right, we have Breitbart, InfoWars, Daily Caller, and others. And these are garbage. Don't read them. You're not really going to learn anything new from them. The information that they present is questionable at best, and it's not going to do anything other than feed into your own bias. So we have three major fact-checking websites that we in the library world really like. So they all tend to operate on the same function. PolitiFact now has a new owner, but originally it was a product of the Tampa Bay Times, which is a Pulitzer Prize-winning newspaper. And PolitiFact itself, the website, won the Pulitzer Prize in 2008 for its reporting on the presidential election. So fantastic source. Factcheck.org is a project of the Annenberg Public Policy Center at the University of Pennsylvania, which is a Ivy League school. This one has a lot of, it's pretty highbrow. It's a lot of graduate students, public policy researchers, policy wonks, people participating in the thing. This is a think tank. And then we have Snopes, which historically was debunking rumors and urban legends and has moved into fact checking. So all three of these sources will employ journalists, researchers, public policy experts, and all three of them have pretty much the same format in that they will state a claim or a statement from a leader or something like that. They'll give it a rating. So PolitiFact is really tongue-in-cheek. Snopes is a little bit more straightforward. I like PolitiFact because the really, really bad ones are pants on fire, and I just think that's really funny. And then at the bottom, they will give you an explanation of how they came to that conclusion. All three of them cite sources. They give you the research. They tell you how they reached that conclusion. You can find out who wrote those articles, what their credentials are, and all kinds of information. They're very, very transparent, and they're very good. A lot of the stuff that you're going to see tonight at the debate is going to be all over these three websites. I would encourage you to kind of bop around and see which one you like best. I tend to go to all three, depending on what I'm researching. And it's rare that they're stumped, but if they're stumped, they'll tell you why, and they'll tell you when you can expect an update. And of course, you can go to the library. So in all of the dozens of times that I have given this presentation, I have probably received fewer than 5 questions asking me to fact check or help find a better information source or anything like that. So please remember that you can go to your local library. It's what we're here for. We love it. We love talking to people. Ask us questions. If we're stumped, we'll tell you and we'll try to find out the answer. So let's talk about the economic impact of fake news. Now you may think, what's the harm? These are completely fake articles that I pulled off the internet about a year ago. So I want you to think about what it might mean to you if you saw one of these on social media. Now this one's really good. So Blue Buffalo is a pet food brand. It's kind of a premium pet food brand. And they issued a tweet. They've got a blue check. We know that this is the real deal because they've been verified. And this person who does not have a blue check wrote in that they're putting lead into their dog food. So do your research before buying a product. And this one only got to, we kind of caught this one before it really went anywhere. But if you're a pet owner and you see something like this, especially when you see it from somebody that you trust, are you likely to buy Blue Buffalo the next time that you go to the pet store? Probably not, because you're not sure if this information is real. Turned out it was completely fake. I know I'm going through these really fast. I just want to point out some of these headlines. Completely fake. This one was really sad. Do you guys remember when that bridge collapsed at Florida International University and a bunch of people died? There was a rumor going around that it was a woman who designed the bridge, and there was a rumor going around that she was picked because of her background and not because of her credentials, and it was untrue. And so she, it really affected her reputation. It was just a really sad thing. And we heard about Pizzagate. It happened 4 years ago. It's conspiracy theory. We're still talking about it 4 years later for some reason. But this is really serious. Somebody brought an assault rifle to a pizzeria because they thought that there was child trafficking happening there. Turned out it was completely fake. But guns in public places, usually not a great idea. And it made a lot of people really uncomfortable, and it really affected that person's business. This one's ridiculous. And this is my last one. Now this is really gross, but think about if you own a local bar and Tuesday night is wing night and this is going around on social media that chicken wings are rat meat. Is that going to affect your bottom line? Absolutely. So these kinds of things, they have real world consequences. Aside from doxing, aside from cyberbullying, if you're a small business owner, bad PR can really take you down. Even if you're not a small business owner, some of these stories that I've just shared with you can really, really have an impact on kind of your bottom line. So let's talk about sources. So I've got 3. I've just launched a poll. I've got 3, you can move it out of your way if you need to. 3 screenshots that I took today on the internet. So I want you to take a good look at this. I'm going to give you about 30 seconds to try to figure out if it's real, fake, or let me know if you don't know. Let's go ahead and vote. It's anonymous. I can't see how you voted, so don't worry. Okay. So let's look at this. Share results. Okay, good. Nobody fell for it. Okay. So half of you thought it was fake and half of you weren't sure. That's great. Let's look at this. Now, scandal during local MMA event, that's mixed martial arts. Spectator Phil Norton beat one of the fighters. If any of you live in Glen Ellen, you might know who Phil Norton is. He's our police chief. There's a couple of clues here. Now, this is completely ridiculous. It says that it happened today in Glen Ellen. Don't you think you would have heard about that? There's just not a lot of it. These stories up here are really weird. I've never heard of TBS Daily News, so I'm glad none of you fell for it because this is a hoax website. So this is a website where you can like put in your own headline and it formulates it in a way that looks like it might be a news story so you can kind of prank your friends. Thankfully, this website has a big disclaimer on it that says this is completely fake and it's only here to kind of get your friends, you know, to believe it or something like that. But if you posted something like this and you were a little bit better about it, you might get some people to fall for it. Okay, so let's launch this poll. So here we have charging herd of cows kills second man in England this month. So take a look. Let me know what you think. Last call for voting. Okay, so let's talk about this. So about half of you thought it was fake. Some people thought it was real and some people were unsure. So New York Post, definitely a questionable source. That should have gotten your kind of spidey senses right off the bat. New York Post is a tabloid. It doesn't mean that everything that they write about is factually incorrect, but you want to be really, really skeptical of a source like this. Turns out this actually did happen, unfortunately. There was a stampede, I guess, and 2 people were killed by a herd of cows in a very short time in England. Now, I chose this to kind of trick you because I want you to think about, you know, some of these good sources and bad sources and what the difference of them is. Now, this one, I can totally understand why you would think it would be fake. And I'm really glad that many of you were skeptical of it because it's got a lot of ads. It's got this pop-up. It's got this thing down here. It's got an ad up here. You might, you know, it was posted a few days ago. It's kind of weird. You might have heard about it. Some of these other articles at the top are questionable. So it's really good that you're skeptical, but you can always see if any other reputable news sources are reporting on the same information. That's a really good way to fact check it. And you can always go to one of your 3 fact checking sources. Okay, so we've got our last one. Take a look, let me know what you think. Okay, last call for voting. Let's look. All right, unfortunately, one of you fell for it. This is fake news. It is satire. Now, the New Yorker, wonderful source. It's in that really highbrow bubble that we looked at on our news quality chart. It's got a lot of really good information, but this is written by Andy Borowitz, who is the author of the Borowitz Report, which is a satire column. This did not happen, so I'm very sorry. But thanks for playing. That was really great. You guys did great. Sometimes I like to give this quiz at the beginning and then, you know, review it at the end. And a lot of times people change their mind about how they would have voted. So the point of this exercise is to make you think about the New Yorker is a good source, but it has some fake news in it because it's got a satire columnist. The New York Post is a terrible source, but it reported on something factual simply because it was so outrageous that they couldn't pass it up. So there is not a one size fits all lesson to be learned from this. Not all, you know, news sources from, you know, if you're talking about opinions and editorials, especially, I would not count those as news. Those are, you know, not reporting the news of the day. They're reporting somebody's opinion. And it's really important to be skeptical of all of these things. So great job, everyone. Let's move on. So let's talk about social media news. So this is a Pew Research report on how people get their news. And you can see increasingly people are getting their news on social media. At the time when they published this report in 2017, they reviewed Twitter, YouTube, and Snapchat. I'm sure that Facebook has skyrocketed as well, but you can see even over a four-year comparison, you can see a really kind of sharp increase in the number of people who are getting their news from these social media sites. I'm not on Snapchat. I don't really know how you would get news on Snapchat. That is a little bit scary to me, especially because it's so popular with our younger audience. But it's something to be aware of that, you know, in 2017, 29% of people were getting, or they had a 29% increase in people who were getting their news from those sites. Now, on the other hand, television news is declining. So this is universal, even among kind of, you know, our aging population, who we think of as the people who watch cable news, television news. So you can see that as online news rose, TV news decreased. And this is people who get their news from these sources. And this graph is to show you that older Americans are driving an increase in online news usage. So we think of, you know, people getting their news online as being something that's really driven by the younger generation, you know, our teens and our young adults. And that's just not true. We're seeing an increase in people getting their news online across the board in every age group and every demographic group. And it's especially true for older Americans as well. So when we talk about the mainstream media, we're talking about a few different categories. So this is cable news. The big players here are, oops, I skipped a slide. Maybe I didn't skip a slide. Sorry. All right, so this is network news. So these are your channels 2, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11. These are typically pretty accurate, unbiased. Now they are going to present information in a particular way. They may add something in that another source will leave out, or leave something out that other sources are putting in, but it's typically featuring reporters and journalists. These are your major networks. They're free with a TV subscription, or like if you have one of those antennas or something like that, you can get these pretty much for free. The major player in Europe is the BBC. There are many others, but it's very easy to get. You can follow them on social media to get their news. We also have cable news. So this is CNN, Fox, and MSNBC are kind of the big three, but there are others as well. Now, these, remember, are in our, you know, blue ovals on the side of that news quality chart. So it can be reporting the news as it happens, but it also features pundits aside of journalists and reporters. So you want to be really careful about who's talking, what interests they have, whether they're trying to get you to vote for them, or, you know, donate to their nonprofit, or build awareness for their brand, something like that. All of those things can affect the quality of the information that you're getting from these sources. And then, of course, we have print journalism. We've got the New York Times, the Tribune, the LA Times. I would add to this, you know, our local newspapers, pretty much anything that comes in print falls into this category. Typically very accurate and unbiased in terms of what's being reported, but with the caveat that it can contain opinion and editorials. And those are not news, those are somebody's opinion. So you want to be a little bit careful about that, but generally it's pretty easy to tell if something is an opinion or an editorial or a column. It'll have some kind, in print, it'll say right at the top. Online, it'll say, you know, so-and-so, comma, columnist, or so-and-so, comma, editor, something like that. That can be an indication that something is based in opinion and not fact. Other sources include the Associated Press and Reuters, which are two major news syndicates. A lot of times you'll see the same article with even the same wording reposted on many different news websites, and they're getting that information from one of these syndicates. We've got NPR, Public Broadcasting, The Economist, The New Yorker, any of those ones that were kind of in the middle on that news quality chart would fall into this if they're not otherwise in print or on TV. So with that, I will turn it over to questions. I didn't see anything other than people's email addresses in the chat. I just want to remind you that if you would like to receive the handout, just drop your email in the chat. At this point, I will take your questions. We have about 10 minutes until this program wraps up, and just wanted to let you know that we have some really great things coming up aside from Jason Reynolds speaking for the Glenbart Parent Series in a few minutes. We've got a couple get together for trivia, which is perfect for families if you want to bring your kids. We're going to be talking about taxes after COVID-19, very hot topic right now as we kind of start to think about tax season. And then on October 24th, which is a Saturday, we've got drive-in bingo and a number of other events. So Aisha says that she would add truthiness as a vocab word. That is a great suggestion, and I think I will do that. I'm giving this talk at a number of other libraries in the next few weeks, and I think that that would be a great addition. Thank you, Rachel. She said this is important and relevant. I really appreciate that feedback. Love talking about this. Would love to hear your questions. Anything you got going on? Ginny would like to know why there is such a disdain from the right for mainstream media. So it is really difficult to answer this question without getting political. And I think right now, you know, if we look at COVID-19, for example, the World Health Organization has said that we have dual pandemics going on right now. We of course have the virus, but we also have an infodemic. And I think that some players in the political arena have an interest, you know, financial, political, power, economic, I mean, whatever you want to call it, they have some kind of an interest in repressing information, or gaslighting is another term that sometimes we talk about in this talk, which is, you know, where somebody just repeatedly tells you that you're wrong, you don't know what you're talking about, something like that. There's a lot of power in words like that, and when there's criticism of the press or mainstream media, a lot of times it can indicate, you know, fraud, unethical behavior. We're seeing a little bit of that right now. So I would say, without getting too deep in the weeds of a political discussion, that it's probably happening because there's something that they will benefit from specific information being repressed. Does that answer your question, Ginny? Great. Victoria, thanks for coming. Says fantastic presentation. Thanks, everyone. I will send out those handouts. I'll stick around for just a minute or two. If you do have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, my email is right here. You can send me an email. You can stop by. We're open every day now. And we'd love to talk to you about fake news. Thanks for coming.